Hello guys, this is Dr. Charity, and today we are going to discuss about case taking. Uh, as a beginner, what I felt that while doing taking up a case during our BHMS times itself was a lengthy process. We used to follow a performer, and the thing was at the end of taking the whole case, we were left with a lot of symptoms, but rather no idea of what can be the medicines which we can prescribe to the patient. After the whole case taking process, we had to go through evaluation of symptoms. We had to at certain times repertorize the case, and a must we needed to do a miasmatic evaluation for finding out a proper medicine for the patient. So while starting your practice, and you might know, all of you who are just starting their practices, that this whole process is a little bit lengthy, but still when it gives you a good result, it is worth it. But one of the things I would like to try to make you understand is that while taking up a case, if you make your thought process run a little bit more deeper into the symptoms while taking them, then you can think of remedies while you are taking up the case itself. Our whole principle of finding a suitable remedy for a patient is based on deductive logic. So, while taking up a case, when you are deducing facts, when you are trying to deduce symptoms, and you are basically narrowing down the number of medicines which can be presented for the patient itself. So, let's continue this discussion further. And homeopathic case taking for most beginners is a very lengthy task. As I said, at the end of the case taking, for most of the students are left with a lot of information and data, but no faintest idea of the remedy. We have to do evaluation and repertorial analysis. But while doing this repertorial methodology, while taking up repertorizing the case, we make the whole system of finding the medicine a very mathematical process. But homeopathic prescription should not be a mathematical process. It's a very organic process. My idea is to develop a thought process while taking up a chronic case. This always helps to narrow down the number of medicine during the case taking process. So we will start a discussion with the present complaint. So whenever the present complaints, a patient comes up to you with their complaints, as per organon of medicines, you make tell them to describe their complaints in whole length, and then uh, acquire more information from the patient with giving more stress to the cost of the present complaints which he is facing, and trying to find out more details of a complaint like sensation, location, sensation, modalities, and concomitants. These forms a complete symptom and helps us find a better medicine for the patient. In present complaints also, things can be thought, especially in relation to organ pathology. You can, this is a very basic things as we know from your common knowledge itself, but still I'm trying to put it forward. You might know that most stomach irritation are caused by anxiety of the mind. Liver affections are mostly common with grief. Stress has got its direct effects on kidneys and pancreas. Thus, in many cases of diabetes mellitus, where there is a sudden spike of blood sugar without use of any medicines, is almost invariably related to anxiety or stress. Most of the left sided pathologies are related to emotional trauma, whereas right sided organ, deeper organ pathologies are related to when there's one's self respect, one's ego has been hurt. So, before even taking up a full case, one can have some ideas about a few causes of some symptoms or pathologies. Now, when we are taking the history of present complaint, this is a very important part. Generally, the this part is always is narrated by the patient themselves, and there are few extra details which can help in selection of the remedy. The cause should always be given top priority, whether there is it's in the physical plane or in the psychological plane, because as we know, even in homeopathic treatment, we are always understanding that the causation should be removed. Until and unless you remove the cause, you can't remove the pathology, you can't remove the disease, you can't remove the illness from the patient. And basically, so in many cases though, when there is a deep psychological trauma, or there are many kind of other past histories of the patient, or there are histories of illnesses in which has caused the present complaint, where we can't maybe uh, remove the disease itself as a whole, but in many cases when we are treating the cause itself, then we have a good chances of treating the illness in a very rapid manner. Because in many cases, whenever you are not treating the cause, no matter your best selected medicines might fail. See, I'll give an example. It's like I gave it in few days before. That say if a patient comes with a severe arthritis, seronegative for RA, not much of an osteoarthritic changes as well. Many of the cases, many of these cases are basically reactive arthritis, which is caused by suppression of infections by the modern medicine. In this kind of cases, if we can find a history of suppressed diarrhea, suppressed dysentery, suppressed discharges, or even suppressed UTI infections, we can think of abrotenum. And if you see, if you give abrotenum in these kind of cases, it's not just I'm talking about reactive arthritis, but in many cases of arthritis, if you find that there is a history of suppressed diarrhea or dysentery, or even any kind of uh, suppress UTI also, abrotenum helps a lot. And while giving a few doses of abrotenum, you can easily get a very good result. Even in spondylosis also, you can get a very good result with abrotenum if you find that there is a history of suppressed diarrhea. In many cases of organic pathology, if it had started from some sort of emotional trauma or insult, you can always think of medicines like ignatia, lachesis, causticum, staphysagra, etc. In even so, there are plenty more medicines regarding this kind of causation in the mental plane. So whenever there is a causation in mental plane which has triggered the disease, no matter, and if you are giving any medicines which is not covering the mental plane but only covering the physical uh, only covering the physical aspects of the diseases, or rather physical aspects of the patient's symptomatology, you will see that the patient is getting a little bit relief, but it is not helping the patient to a much higher extent. Until and unless you address this kind of symptoms in the mental plane which has caused the disease to trigger in the first place, you won't be able to treat the disease in its whole extent. In acute prescriptions also, causation holds a very important place. Like it's a very common example, like Dalkamar, Rastox, and uh, monsoon exposure, rain exposure, and aconite, and many more other diseases in cold exposure, which leads to any kind of uh, complaint. In aconite, we see a suddenness and violentness of symptoms, but if you find a cold exposure also, it is a very good medicine. If there is history of exposure to sun, basically you can think of other medicines. If you are think of summer remedy, problems occurring in the summer season, you can think of bryonia, you can think of other medicines. If you are getting complaints of the in the winter season, you can think of other medicines. In next we are going to go towards the past history of the patient. Whenever dealing taking up a past history, it is very important you take it in a very minute manner. It's most of the times patient forgets many of the diseases he has suffered, until and unless he hears the name of the disease from your uh, mouth itself. In many cases, it's always better to have this kind of history means name of diseases always in your mind and always ready to say it, so that you don't miss out any of the details if the patient forgets themselves also. See, if you find I have given some relative points where you can use the past history of the patient in forming the first prescription of a patient. It's like wherever there is a history of sore throat or repeated abscess, so it should be a history of recurrent sore throat or history of repeated abscess. You can, no matter what may be the pathology, you can think of streptococcus. Even so, if a patient comes to you and says that he is having sore throat on a regular basis, means every now and then he is getting a sore throat, you can maybe think of belladonna, you can think of Maxol. But whenever you are getting uh, even a history of abscess with it, you can surely go for streptococcus as well. And also you can use streptococcus in the first prescription as well if there is too much recurrence of the same symptom. If there is a history of tendency to catch cold, or there may be a past history of asthma, chronic bronchitis, pneumonia, or even tuberculosis, this generally indicates that the patient is of a tubercular background, that is, having a tubercular diathesis. So, in these kind of cases, an anti-tubercular drug has to be given in the first prescription, and tuberculinum or bacillinum has to be given as an intercurrent remedy in these kind of chronic cases of this origin. Whenever there is a history of typhoid, it's not repeated typhoid, it's typhoid only. If there is a history of severe typhoid or repeated typhoid, you can think of typhoidinum in any case of a chronic pathology. If there is a history of repeated UTI, you can think of thuja. If there is a history of repeated malaria spelling is a little bit wrong there, with and there is a liver affection right now you are dealing with, you can think of malaria officinalis. If there is a history of repeated dysentery, you can think of dysentery compound. If there is too many diseases in the past history, or absolutely almost no past history of diseases in a patient, you can definitely think of carcinosin. And whenever there is a history, when there is a history of pneumonia, you can think of lycopodium. But wherever there is a history of repeated pneumonia, you can think of pneumococcin. In many cases of gastric CA, where it has come up from gastric ulcer, you can think of H. pylori. And whenever there is a history of food poisoning leading to liver diseases, especially liver CA, you can think of aflatoxin. Some of these medicines are quite common in regular practice. Some are little bit rare to find. And even so, I'm never going to say to give this medicines without having their proper symptomatology. In few cases, like say if you are finding a case of repeated typhoid, it's a very common symptom, it's a very very important symptom for typhoid, prescription of typhoidinum. So using that, you can prescribe typhoid. Whenever you are thinking of thuja, you need to have a symptomatology of thuja with history of UTI, then you go for thuja. Whenever there is a history of repeated dysentery along with the symptoms of dysentery compound, if you find that, go for dysentery compound. And carcinosin also, whenever you're finding absolutely no history of past no history of diseases in the past, or too many diseases in the past history, along with desire for rain, along with too many red moles on the skin, along with a person who has lived always a very disciplined life, you can think of carcinosin. Now we will come to the next important section, which is family history. Family history also helps in finding diathesis and certain predispositions to certain diseases. They, however, also helps on thinking of certain remedies as well. See, family history of, again I said, family history of asthma, pneumonia, tuberculosis indicates a tubercular diathesis. Thus, at a certain point of treatment, tuberculinum or bacillinum needs to be given as an intercurrent. Family history of cancer indicates a cancerous diathesis. If in these cases we get additional symptoms of red moles, desire rainy weather, insomnia, we can most certainly get a clear indication of carcinosin as a first medicine in treatment in no matter what pathology. But I would rather say, if we are treating cancer any case of cancer and we are getting this kind of symptoms, we can think of carcinosin. But even so, without even any cancer in cancer's pathology, if we can think of carcinosin in other diseases also. If say if there is a family history of diabetes mellitus in a female patient of PCOD, we can think of metformin. It's a very uh, in uh, what should I say? Metformin is a very rare drug, which is it's an allopathic drug which has been now available in potentized form as well, which can be given for PCOD with when there is a family history of diabetes. Even so, if there's an as an extra thing I would like to say, metformin is also used by modern medicines to treat PCOD in many cases. Next, we will go to generalities. While discussing about generalities and physical generals, we need to take this part in a very detailed manner. As times, whenever we are starting our case taking, we take this they take this part according to the performer, which gives us a very small amount of questions. We need to have a detailed approach, and with this with proper knowledge of materia medica, this can also help in understanding the mind of an individual itself, which makes it even more which helps it even more in understanding the mind symptoms as well. So whenever taking the appetite in physical generals, I am not going to be discussing all each and every point which is there in the case taking performer, but with I'll give only few important points which you need to always take in more details. See, whenever you are taking the appetite or asking about the appetite of a person, you need to know how's the appetite, can the person tolerate hunger or not. If the person can't tolerate hunger, then what happens if he or she does not eat when hungry? Does the person wants to take a little food at short intervals, or is the person's appetite a normal or increased? Timings of increase or decrease appetite, or both? Does the person feel satiety after a few mouthfuls, or is the person more energetic after meal or after before meal or after meal? Some medicines in this kind of context is I've given the repertorial rubric as well. Mind irritability, eating after amyl, ammon carb, ammon mure, calibicrom, natrum salt, phosphorus. For this, I'm saying from Dr. Sarkar's knowledge. Whenever a person is like angry when hungry, you can think of ammon mure as a very good medicine, especially when they are ameliorated by taking food. Here we can think of anacardium, that is ameliorated by eating, but anacardium is not so much as of angry when they are hungry, but they are basically better by eating. Another few medicines which we can think that one of those medicines which is very much energetic before having food, that is they are more energetic on empty stomach, or rather having little food. One of the very good medicines in this kind of aspect is natrum group of medicines. Natrum group of medicines are basically better in feeling in empty stomach. In rubric also, in repertory, you will find mind confusing eating after. You can find coccus cacti, pulsatilla, lyco, mesodymium, natrum mure, and nux vomica. Pulsatilla being the most important, pulsatilla and coccus cacti. But natrum mure is, as according to Dr. Sarkar, is a very good medicine. Natrum group of medicines is very good whenever there is energetic, when a person feels energetic in empty stomach. While taking thirst of a patient, you can definitely think of few medicines even in acute prescriptions also, wherever you are finding, especially in this kind of corona crisis where you might get many cases of corona. Always remember to ask for thirst, because if you find this one place, you can find many medicines itself. You see, whenever there is a person with fever having thirst for large quantities of water at a time with much dryness of mucous membrane, you can think of bryonia. Whenever this thirst is for very small quantities of water, you can think of arsenic alba. Whenever there is a thirst for profuse cold water, thirst is profuse and it is for cold water, or it might be for juices or any kind of fresh fresh juices or any kind of cold drinks, you can think of causticum and phosphorus. And in this causticum, even the person has got a sore throat, they are always feeling better having cold water. uh, you can think of cupramate as well in this kind of aspect, drinking water ambulation. Phosphorus is also there. Phosphorus, in phosphorus, whenever the water gets heated in the stomach can't hold it and it is vomited out. Then there's thirst profuse more at night, means the these kind of people generally tends to drink at least 4 to 6 liters of water in a day. You can definitely think of medurinum. And especially if those people have a tendency to uh, take few sips of water or take a drink, have water while if they get up at night for urinating for any cause, if they have water, then you can definitely think of medurinum for those patients. Even so, definitely with added symptoms like a little bit of forgetfulness, then there's always going to be a little bit of burning associated with medurinum. And any sort of other complaints also with this kind of generalities, you can think medurinum in those aspects. And the next symptom we are going to talk about is sips water while having food, that is, take sips of water in between foods. This is a very classical symptom of sulfur, and no matter whatever may be the pathology, if this symptom is coming, you need to think of sulfur in your prescription. You might not have to give sulfur as sulfur itself, but it can be used with Cali group of medicine, natrum group of medicines, or any kind of other medicines. It might be associated with calcare, it might be calcarea sulf, it can be natrum sulf, it can be Cali sulf. But this is a very good medicine whenever the person wants to sip water in between food. And then there is always thirstlessness associated with all complaints. Whenever this comes up, you can always think of belladonna falciparum, gelsemium, and Knox-Mostata, and even there are more medicines for that. In the next most favorite part of the patient and most favorite part of many doctors is asking the desire, aversion, and intolerance of the patient. There are so many varieties of kind of patients you can find, and using this desire aversions, you can think of even make a miasmatic evaluation as well. But I will definitely say for that, never try to mm, take up indications for a medicine from these three places. This can be used for rather completing means getting as an extra point for whenever you are thinking of any medicine. But it is until and unless you find very very keynote desire or aversion or intolerance, it is better not to think of any medicines from this point. Yeah, like few strong symptoms which I use generally is for like desire for bitter, I generally go for natrum group of medicines. Whenever there is desire for extra salt, I think of lycopodium or natrum or causticum and few other more medicines also. And while thinking of these kind of medicines, I like to add another point to it. While taking up desire, always ask the patient what is his favorite temperature of a food, means whether he likes to have the food very hot, whether he likes to have the food as warm, or does he like it cold. If a person can't tolerate cold food, if he desires hot food all the time, he or she, you can think of lycopodium, you can think of chelidonium for this kind of patients. No matter what may be the pathology, you can think of this kind of these kind of medicines. Next we are going to go for is the stool, that is the bowel movement of the patient. During inquiring for bowel movement, importance should be given on regularity, timing if present, consistency, and if there are any unfinished sensation in the patient. Goes to stool, I have given few examples. Goes to stool as soon as he wakes up is a typical again symptom of sulfur. and you can think of natrum self in this kind of context. Goes to stool after water, tea, breakfast, you can think of thuja. For unfinished sensation after stool, where and where wherever there's a lot of medicines have been given, but if the patient is chilly with nausea without vomiting or nausea ameliorated by vomiting, you can definitely think of nux vomica as a very good medicine no matter what may be the pathology. Even it might be a severe kidney disease or it can be a cancer, but you can think of nux vomica. Next medicine we are going next point we are going to talk about is the urine of the patient. Always inquire if there is any burning sensation before, during, or after urination. Always inquire if the person has any problem of incontinence or any problem of retention. As see many in many cases, most patients don't even know if they are having any symptoms of UTI or not. Even so, whenever there is a case of fever coming to you with a very high temperature, always inquire about the urine output of the patient. If there is even little bit burning associated with the urine, or it may be there might be incontinence of urine, you need to understand that the patient might have got a UTI lurking in the background which is causing the fever. You need to address it so that you may be able to treat the patient much better. Again, after urine there is thermal reaction. In thermal reaction, you should always consider what whether the person can tolerate, like a person who can't tolerate winter is basically chilly, who can't tolerate summer are hot, and those who can't tolerate extremes of both or prefer the middle ground are generally ampithermals. But still, with minute questioning, you can understand the thermal reaction. Always ask whether the person can tolerate sun exposure or not, and also ask mood wise, does he or she feels better in rainy season or cloudy weather, these things or not. Because if you find a person having desire for cloudy weather, you can think of Medorrhinum causticum carcinosin. If the person can't tolerate sun exposure, it's not only persons with you can think of glonoin, you can think of natrum group of medicines, you can think of thuja also in this kind of context. Next is sleep. Many patients complain of not having enough sleep or disturbed sleep or insomnia as well. On careful inquiry in many patients may show that many sleep late and wake up late, and this is not insomnia. Interacting with phone is a major reason for sleeping late. Most patients generally have the complaint of unrefreshing sleep. For genuine cases of sleeplessness, you can always think of thuja and carcinosin as a constitutional remedy. And other medicines which you can add up to your prescriptions are passiflora in mother tincture, pcd in mother tincture, or even califors in biochemic tablets. Whenever you are getting any problems of sleep, you can definitely think of these medicines to add or to give in these kind of cases. Other important points to see in sleep is how the person sleep, that is the decubitus of a patient. Basically, whenever the patient is in sitting posture, we are always considering that decubitus is to be sitting. But in while taking up history of sleep, it is better to understand in what kind of position does the person prefers to lie. If the person prefers lying on left side, we can think of thuja and we can think of stanamate. When a person likes to lie on right side, we can think of antimtat and phosphorus. Lies on abdomen, medorrhinum acetic acid. Lies on back with forearm overhead is pulsatilla. Dreams, uh, there needs to be a very totally different video for dreams, which I will put up later, but it is a huge part of forming a prescription. See, dreams are the reflection of our thoughts in our mind, and it can tell us so much more about a patient that we can easily even prescribe very accurately just by thinking of dreams itself as a very important point. Dreams of robbers, dreams of dead people, dreams of dead people talking, dreams of God, failure, failing in exam, unable to write in exam, unable to reach destination, dreams of falling, dreams of snakes, dreams of ghosts, dreams of and dreams where after a certain point when we are thinking that this happened in my dream, that is deja vu. You can think of these kind of medicines which is showed in the slide. There are so many medicines in most of these points, but they are the ones I use generally and get in common. Mental generals is the last part we need to think, that is where before all the information from the patient, that is. And this is a very neglected part of case taking, as most of the importance is always giving to the physical aspect, but this is a very important part. Through simple questions we can understand the state of mind of a patient, and also helps us in selection of remedy, as many at times the causation of the disease originates here. Most of the complex pathological cases we get today are psychosomatic in origin. So, whenever getting a pathological case, we always need to have a proper study of the mental symptoms before making a prescription. Here are some indications which I use is that desire for solitude indicates depression, anger on slightest contradiction, consolation, aggravation means that there is a deep-seated grief that the person does not express their emotions about. This person where these kind of people barely cry, and even if they do, they will never shed a tear in front of others. This is a typically in people who are constantly brooding about the past. This is a very good indications of natrum mur as a remedy, and in short, in natrum group of patients also, in you can think of this kind of mental symptoms. Any kind of explosive anger, throws things when angry, or desire to escape is found in people whose self-respect has been hurt, whose ego has been hurt, who has been insulted but could not do anything about it. In these kind of cases, you can think of staphyseria. And next, we can think of weeps easily, who means their mental defenses are acting well, and these people tend to have a more functional disturbances generally. Exceptions are always there. Again, if you in this kind of mental symptoms, if there is an excessive sympathy for all others, it indicates that there has been a very deep mental trauma in the past from which they have been able to move on. We can always who people who can't see sufferings of others generally had any sufferings in their life as a whole, have seen much suffering in their life. If you find desire for darkness or black in in any kind of patient while taking up a case, you can think of autumn group of medicines, which gives a clue about the patients, because most of autumn group of patients tends to be very jolly, very much expressive and lively in front of doctors, because they tend to mask their emotions very efficiently. So in the from this kind of simple symptoms, you can get a clear better picture of an autumn group's of patient's mind, and inquire further about his or her past experiences. These kind of autumn personalities even tend to hide, have a tendency to hide basic kind of injury marks if they have done to themselves from you, and they are never going to be easily open about what they have in thoughts in their mind. Memory, when asked about, it should be always asked about recent memories, because uh, basically uh, it is the recent memories of a person which is generally pampered. The memories of the past are generally never always remains intact. So in this, in conclusion, I would again like to state that the obvious fact that these are approaches I have learned from Dr. Sunimal Sarkar, and all medicines said here are used on a daily basis by Dr. Sarkar and as well as me. Hope it helps, and I hope these kind of approaches means this kind of approach while taking up a case helps you in understanding in trying to develop a thought process inside yourself, so that while taking up a case, your mind is actively integrated into the whole case, so that your mind is constantly thinking of ways how the disease originated, of what can be the more possible remedies, even before ending your case taking itself. With experience, though, I can definitely tell you that you will be able to think of medicines far more efficiently than you were thinking about it before in your uh, in the starting itself. But we must always know and we must always understand, and without criticizing ourselves or others, that most of our masters, most of all the big physicians we see today started around like us, like beginners who refused to give up. So, this is the message for you. Never give up on yourself, never give up on your patient, and always give it your best shot. Because at the end of the day, whenever you sit with yourself, you need to understand that what can you have done and what did you do. You need to always keep that in your mind. Give an honest approach always towards a patient, and we these kind of thought processes, I hope it really helps you. And with this, I would like to end this video today, and I wish for all of you who are starting their practices uh, that you reach new heights in homeopathy, and I hope you become more efficient, more even more knowledgeable than me and many other people. So with this wish, I like to wish that you have a great day, and bye bye.